I'd like to call this meeting of the Merrimack School District Budget Committee to order. I ask that you please all rise and join us along with everybody else in the audience in pledging allegiance to our country's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Just so everybody understands how tonight's going to work, the Budget Committee is going to have a meeting between now and 7:30 where we're going to be doing a few things. We could end up recessing that meeting before 7:30. At 7:30 will be the public hearing on everything that's in the budget. And at that time, as we go through the different warrant articles, is when we will be taking public testimony on the warrant articles, for or against. And we also have minutes that the Budget Committee has to do. You'll notice on the agenda, the first thing I put down was warrant article review. We've gotten some information from administration, and my plan is that after the public hearing, we will vote on these warrant articles to recommend or not recommend. When we did the vote on the operating budget, that was just to bring the operating budget to the public hearing, because that is our total responsibility, and we did make adjustments to it. You'll find you have, in reference to a question of towns on public kindergarten, of towns that are tuition-free, that towns have money involved, and others that are unspecified. That was delivered to us. You'll also find a picture of what the driveway looks like in the circle in the lower lot at Thorntons Ferry School for the paving aspect of it. And the superintendent also had a thing on graduates who have attended kindergarten. So on a review of any of these warrant articles, does anybody have any further questions we need to go over? Yes, Kevin.
We got a new copy of the warrant articles today. They're worded the same, so okay. There no changes came from legal or anything like that.
Yeah, just for the record, the operating budget was increased by $6,000.
Right.
And then the school board had voted on that article prior to the $6,000. So I took their recommendation off because now they have to revote because it's a different number. So that's the only change.
That's the only change.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for clarification? Okay, then we are going to go into approval of minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 23rd. Oh, before we do that, I'm sorry. Carol Lang is excused this evening. She had a minor surgical procedure this morning, and she's on good painkillers. Shelley Jacoby is excused this evening, as is Amanda Heidberger, who just let me know she was feeling ill. So now, I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of the 23rd. Motion by Kevin. Do I have a second?
Well,
Is that a second?
Yes.
Okay, that's a second. Corrections, additions, questions, deletions.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was reading that and about Reed's Ferry, the replacement of the piano, as far as I
Where are
understood-
you on the, so we have it, what page are you on, and
Oh, my God, now you're really getting down to it.
page 1 or 2? Page 1.
It's the part that talks about a
Liaison
piano
report?
replacement. A new electric piano for Reed's Ferry. Well, the gist of it, wherever it is, it's. I thought that the piano being replaced was a conventional piano being replaced with an electric piano, and the notes seem to say that it was an electric piano being replaced with an electric piano.
I don't believe it was an electric piano being replaced
Right.
with an electric piano.
That's the problem with the notes.
So, I'm looking at it right now. The last bullet for discussions says tuning an electric piano costs $100. I just noticed that. Thanks, John. It costs nothing to tune an electric piano. Don't need to. Last bulleted item. Is that what you're talking about? I don't know. I don't have pages.
Pat, if you gotta talk, you gotta do it in the mic.
No. Traditional piano. Yep. Replaced with electric. Yes. Electrics don't need to be tuned.
Any other corrections, additions, or deletions? Is that, no, okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes of January 23rd, please signify by raising your hand. Keep your hands up so I can get a count. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Passes with one abstention. Next up, the minutes of January 30th. Do I have a motion to approve those? Motioned and seconded. Heather and John. Any corrections, additions, or deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes of January 30th, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Passes with one abstention. The minutes of February 6th. Do I have a motion to approve those? Motion by John. Do I have a second? Seconded by David. Any corrections, additions? Yes.
It should be $1,100.
Okay. Any other corrections, additions, or deletions? All those in favor of these minutes, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please say no. All those abstaining, just raise your hand. I just needed to see if you were listening. Okay, we got the minutes done. And we are now in recess until 7:30, when we will open the public hearing. Have all the Budget Committee members up to their seats, please. Thank you. I would like to call this public hearing of the Merrimack School District budget open. My name is Stan Heinrich. I am the chairman of the School Budget Committee. Some of the people sitting, well, all of the people sitting here are members or a liaison to the Budget Committee. We have a few that are absent due to sickness and other such things. The way tonight is going to work is we deal on the public hearing with any moneyed warrant article. We will be voting on these warrant articles, including the operating budget, after the public hearing has been closed. This is your time to come up, sit at the table, make sure to state your name and address, and I would ask you spell your last name so our recording secretary can get it correctly. And then you can speak for or against a warrant article. I don't see us having too much of a time to limit conversation, but, just be respectful of the other folks. The Budget Committee has spent numerous hours reviewing the operating budget and these warrant articles, and we decide whether to recommend or not recommend. The operating budget, we have the ability to change numbers in the budget, though it is a bottom line addition. The school board can change and put the money somewhere else or not spend it. On the special warrant articles, we have an up or down vote only, and we only deal with money. So if you have a particular about a warrant article, whether you don't like the health care or anything else, that's all fine and good, but all as we can vote on is the money. And that also stands true for deliberative session and voting day. With that, the first article that the Budget Committee will be dealing with is warrant article number 3, and it's to raise and appropriate $245,595 for the purposes of funding the first year of a 3-year labor agreement with the Merrimack Education Support Staff. It includes a 3% raise for the employees covered under the contract. It includes health care concessions by the union to the school district and other improvements in terms of training and education for these employees. The 2 out years of the 3-year contract proposal, they estimate that it's going to cost $249,883 in year 2 and $262,199 in year 3. What's happening is you will be voting on Election Day on the money for the first year, but you will be ratifying this multi-year contract, and after this year, these numbers would go into the operating budget. Is there anybody that would like to speak for or against this warrant article? And that includes Budget Committee members. Seeing none, we will move on. I'm sorry. Mr. Mower.
There are a few things that are so clearly needed in terms of the meeting the responsibilities to our employees in the district, than this particular contract and warrant proposal, and it should be highly supported by the community.
Thank you, Chuck. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move on. Warrant Article 4, we do not vote on as a budget committee, because that's only if warrant Article 3 got defeated. The school board could, at their option, call another meeting and adjust money items only. And at that point, if that's what they did, then the budget committee would have to reconvene a meeting and make a decision whether to recommend or not recommend the new amount. We're going to move on to warrant article number 5. This is to raise $150,000, up to $150,000, and it's not to exceed 10% of the unencumbered surplus funds remaining on hand at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, 2018. And I should restate that. It'd be $150,000 or 10% of the surplus, whichever is less. This is for the Emergency Repair Capital Reserve Fund. This is for when you have unanticipated emergencies, such as they have this year with the bats occupying the upper elementary school, that cost a considerable amount of money, and they had to dip into that fund, leaving a very low balance of about, I think it was $5,000, Matt? $5,000 is left in the fund. If there is no surplus, there is no money coming in. And this is coming out of this year's budget, not next year's. Are there any questions on warrant article number 5? Seeing none, we will move on to warrant article number 6. This is to raise and appropriate $214,826 for the purpose of pavement reconstruction at Thorntons Ferry Elementary School. This is to repave the bus loop in the back parking lot, which are in really tough shape. We were given a picture of what it looks like today, and it's in sad shape. It's had a lot of school buses go over it, a lot of cars. Hasn't been repaved in a long, long time. I think it may be the original pavement from when they redid the new loop and entryway there. Yeah. This is a special warrant article like the last two. If this is approved, this work will get done. If this warrant article is disapproved, no means no, and that means they cannot repave that lot. They could patch it in an emergency repair if something happened, but they couldn't just redo it. And one of the things that the school district does to save you money is they put their paving needs with the towns, who pave a lot more than the school district does, and that gets them a lower price. Are there any questions on this warrant article? Warrant Article 6. Seeing none, moving right along. Warrant Article 7. This is to raise and appropriate $275,000 for the purpose of purchasing a certain tract or parcel of land, approximately 6.8 acres, more or less, 0.68, sorry. And this is known as 1 Brentwood Drive. I'm not going to read the parcel ID number. It is owned by the Southeastern Regional Educational Service Center, SERESC. It's the red building over here on the other side of the parking lot. It's across from the blue building, which is Student Services. It is leased currently by the Nashua School District, but the lease runs out June 30th, and they are not going to be renewing the lease. It is believed that we could possibly put a central office in that building, which would encompass the superintendent's office and student services. And then the blue building and the green building would be bulldozed. There has been talk of what it's going to cost to rehabilitate that building to make it usable. And with that in mind, I am going to ask, before we have general public making comments, I would ask that Andy Schneider and Rich Hendricks. Andy Schneider is a school board member. Rich Hendricks is the chairman of the School Planning and Building Committee. Come up, and they wanted to make a couple of brief statements about this building and the purchase of this building and why, et cetera, and then we can go to public comments after that. Which one of you gentlemen would like to go first?
Andy Schneider, 34 Woodward Road. Do you need me to spell my last name? No? Okay.
School board member.
Yeah, school board. Oh, she's looking at me funny. Okay. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just giving a little bit of the history and the background of how we got to this. As Stan indicated, this is a warrant article to purchase the Brentwood building by the school district. It has no other ties to it in this warrant article. It is simply to purchase the building. The background on this is that building, which is called the Brentwood School, has been owned by Ceresc for multiple decades. The Ceresc school district might have owned it like 40, 50 years ago, or some huge number back in the 60s. But Ceresc bought it, at least 30 years ago, with the intent of having a school inside of it to teach special circumstances, kids and things. Ceresc ran the school for quite a while. Ceresc as an entity provides also services to schools like consulting, and they have gone through a change over the last several years where people may know that they also owned a building for conferences in Bedford, that they bought. They created it, and they added on to it. And the downside is that a service organization that does service was now getting into the sort of event business, and they mortgaged Brentwood to pay for the building. The trouble is the economy changed, things occurred, and the bottom line is that Ceresc found themselves in a situation where they had to liquidate and really get back to their roots. I know this because I've also, as a school board member, serve on the board of directors for Ceresc, so I've been there sort of through this whole process. The good news is that Ceresc has sold the building in Bedford for a fair amount of money, and they're getting back to reinventing themselves for services again, to kind of back to their roots. The dangling piece, and this is from a Ceresc board of directors standpoint, is that building is still owned by the bank, and Eastern Bank, I believe Eastern Bank's the one that owns the sort of the paper on it, and they really are not going to let it go to let Ceresc get off the hook. Something needs to occur to that building. The school district as an entity approached Ceresc based on learning about the situation to see if it would entertain a bid, if you will, to go into a purchase and sales of that. After quite a bit of negotiation and discussion, we did much lower bids to the bank, trying to get it, for a lower amount. But the bank ended up at the number that you see in the warrant article, which is $275,000, is as low as they would go to an entity such as the school district to be able to sell the building. And what that would do is wipe out the indebtedness that Ceresc has, and it would make it clean for Ceresc as an entity. So the bottom line is that there is currently a purchase and sales, but it's contingent on passing of this warrant. If the warrant doesn't pass and we don't buy it, then the purchase and sales becomes null and void, and then the bank owns the property. They've indicated to us that they'll sit on the property as opposed to selling, doing anything with it. I don't know exactly what they're going to do, if they're going to try to sell it to a condo person or whatever. We don't know what the entity is. The uniqueness of this building is that the land and the property is right in the middle. As Stan has indicated, it's really sort of across the street from the SAU SPED building, from the SAU and the SPED building. It's about 10,000 square feet. It's been piecemealed together, but it's got a good solid foundation. It's got a lot of operational pieces there. For those that don't know, the current taxable value of that building, if you pull it up, is $1 million. Now, I don't think $1 million is what that building would sell for, but $275,000 is for 3/4 of an acre of land and a building that's on it, given the current market conditions, is not a bad price to do. So it's a fairly prudent cost to have that. The question that comes up is, why do we want to buy it? Well, we want to buy it because, one, it's an abutting land that we'll never have the chance to buy again. This is sort of a one-shot deal that we have to purchase it. The intent, as Stan stated to the school board, is that we'd like to put the SAU SPED building there. Why? We've tried, as people, we won't go into the history of all the different tries we've had for doing SAU SPED building, but one of the pushbacks that we get from people is, take something that's existing. Don't build a new building. Don't find a piece of land and put something there. Find an existing building and do something with it. Show that you're trying to reuse something. As you've seen, and the discussion from last week is, economically, what's the cost to renovate that building versus tearing it down and building a new building? I don't think we have a clear answer to that question, except to say that if we have to own the building first before we can get the details on that number. And I think in the estimate that Matt is looking at on a worst case scenario, it's likely cheaper than the standalone. If you remember right, there was a presentation to the school board and the planning board of what a standalone building would. Standalone building would cost over $3.1 million if we were to put it like where the O'Gara China's courts were. If you want to add on to the high school, it was $3.5 to $4.1 million, depending on what it is. This building, if you were to take the current footprint, retool it in a huge size, it could be over $2 million, but it could be a lot less. And I think the opportunity that we have as a school district and a board is to take our time once we procure this building, and I think this is the important part, is to get the building. But once we procure it, take the time to make this truly a community thought-out method of doing it. Let's look at the building. Let's have local trades come in. Let's have local contractors, local project managers. Look at the building. Work with the district. Work with taxpayers. Work with the town. Come up with a design that makes sense, and try to do RFPs, requests for the bids on it, to see what we can do and keep the money if we can in town. Let's have local trades do the work. These are all ideas that we're trying to do to make it much more palatable to the community, much more palatable to the taxpayer, to spend it efficiently and have it done in Merrimack, to be able to house the SAU and the SPED functions in a single building using an existing structure. So the bottom line is the school board supports purchasing this building so that we have the opportunity to use it, to be able to function with it, and be able to potentially make this the SAU SPED building. And we would fully start planning that and looking at the costs once we procure the building. Because until we procure it, it's all just hypotheticals, right? Because we haven't been able to really get in and look at the, really bring everybody in to look at the possibilities of different ways to reconstruct versus tear down. So that's sort of the high level that I wanted to discuss. I don't know if Rich, from a planning and building, we talked about it last night, so I don't know if you want to add
Thank you, Andy. Rich,
Thank you, Stan.
you're next.
I'm next. It should be mentioned when he says you can't get access to school board, just for point of reference, of course, it's been through the building. The problem is it is currently being used. So when you start looking for quotes and requests, they're not going to let contractors come in and tear it apart and do what they need to do. So that is an important part. If you don't own it, they don't really care. But certainly the school board's been through it. In July, the planning board had given a task to look at expanding the high school, which very quickly they determined and saw the light that it was economically unrealistic. It made no sense in a lot of ways. However, what the planning board also said basically is you've got to get those people out of that building. And they kind of made it, Lynn Christensen made it rather emphatic. We've been saying that for years. This is a great opportunity. The red building has a basement, we don't need to build one. It has an existing site, so you have minimal site work. We don't have to clear trees, we don't have to dig up, pavement and all that. The utilities, for the most part, are already there. We don't need to bring them in any further. The parking lot will be pretty much as is. When and if that gets completed, you also need to redo the whole high school in and out, dropping off, handicap buses picking up, students walking all over the place, students entering and exiting the parking lot in an absolutely teenager-type fashion. That can all be redone. Actually, we're thinking of donating the blue building to they are asking the fire department to do a control burn on the blue. So this truly will be benefits to the community everywhere. The green building's obviously too close to the high school. So there, that's a little side point to that. One thing, getting well ahead of itself, however, when we look at put the building in, I think the one thing we did not really advertise is the building is being drawn up to the point where there will be a conference room. The conference room will be available to the public after hours. It is designed so that there is an entrance exit for the public to use. The rest of the building, of course, will be sealed off, but there'll be bathrooms in the conference room. Through the years that we've been doing this, one of the things that kind of comes back is nobody's got meeting rooms. And we felt this would be a perfect opportunity to have a rather vacant conference room be used by the public. The school board, of course, will set, organizations and janitorial costs and all that type of stuff. And like I said, that's kind of in the future, but it is just a perk that, honestly, we didn't advertise as well, and we thought was actually a very good idea. So we are very much forward to it, because you're literally talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings versus the former that we'd kind of kicked around, the tennis court lots. So this is not an insignificant amount of money to save. So we approve.
Are there any members of the Budget Committee that have any questions for either of these two gentlemen before I let them go? David?
Do you know what the estimated cost would be if we do nothing with the build? Like, so if we buy it this year and we don't renovate for 3 years, how much will that cost us?
You mean the cost to just keep the
Tax?
building?
Yeah, just...
Well, we wouldn't pay any taxes on it, because we would buy it, and it would
okay,
be right. So there's no tax.
so there's no cost?
There'd be. I mean, you want to keep the lights on. You want to use it so that you don't have freezing issues.
Yep.
I mean, it's oil heat today. It's electric. I mean, there's a certain run rate that you'd keep to do. I don't know if it's how many thousands it is, but it's it's sort of it's probably 20,000 maybe total to do it. But the idea is that if it's sat, and even if we buy it and decide to retool it, we obviously can't do that retooling until a year from this summer, right? The earliest, because of the way the budget thing goes. The building does have utilization capabilities. One of the things we would do if we bought the building is be able to open it and show people how we could use it during that year temporarily. There's a half gym inside of it. There's a cafeteria. There are some conference room areas and stuff. So there is function to it to have. If you wanted to do something structured with classes in school, you'd have to do some level of renovation to reuse it in its current footprint. But it's minimal to keep it going. There's nothing you have to do, just keep the building intact for the year.
Okay, so they don't currently pay taxes for that building?
No, Ceresca is a nonprofit. So right now there's no taxes have been paid on that building, as far as I can tell, ever to the town. And if we went from Ceres to the school, it would be a flat change, no tax change on it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other members of the Budget Committee have any questions for these gentlemen? One of the comments I want to make, if you were to use this building, if you got this building and used it next year while you came up with a plan as to what to do to it, it's not fully handicapped accessible now. And I would have to caution you about what you do in terms of repairs before you're going to get to the point where you're going to have to make it handicapped accessible all around after you spend so much money. So please be careful about that if
Right.
this passes. Of course, the other side of the coin is that we could just run a bulldozer through it, level it, and build a new building on an existing foundation.
Well, that's actually where the year will be utilized, to bring
Yeah.
people in. Well, if we bulldozed it, honestly, we wouldn't quite need a 10,000 square foot building. So you would reduce the footprint, there's no doubt about it. But, again, there's so many variables, and we are also talking labor costs 2 years down the road. Commercial building is not hurting. So,
And-
the cost, that's why we're, it is.
And
we're looking 2 years down
unfortunately
road.
for the students and for Matt, you could not put a Dunkin' Donuts there because it's zoned residential.
Unless somebody approached to rezone, but you're absolutely right. It's zoned residential, it's absolutely correct. And I do want to let you know that you're right, it is not in ADA compliance, there are issues there, absolutely, things like bathrooms and other things. There are ramps so that people could function and use it, but if we want to do anything more structured with it, like formal programs, you're right, we'd have to
It's similar to Boston City Hall. You can't get there
Yeah.
inside
Right,
from
you have to go
one
outside and
part
then
of the
go back in
building to
again.
another.
Right, you're absolutely right. I agree.
And that's totally unacceptable.
Right, which is why you use it in an ad hoc fashion during the year as opposed to something formal, so.
All right, I don't see any hands up. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, I'm sorry, Chuck, I apologize. Go right ahead.
I can simply have a point of privilege, Mr. Chairman. I'm only going to get 2 months, or 2 minutes from the school district moderator to make my case at the deliberative session.
Should be 3.
So, well, I'm Chuck Mower, so I get 2. I'm going to try and make some cursory examination of this ill-conceived idea here this evening to both the public and my colleagues here on the Budget Committee. I'm not saying that my particular viewpoint is the correct one. I'm simply saying that I have been in this town a long time. I have been a public servant for a long time. I have been in the construction industry for a long time. I have been in the teaching industry for a long time. I have served in a number of capacities, and I've witnessed a number of scandalous things take place in this community during my 69 years living here. And this is not entirely unlike a great deal of the opportunities that have been presented to us in many years past from other past boards, all well-meaning and well-intended, just like the road to hell it's paved with. We're being sold something here, and it's not a parcel of land. If it was a parcel of land, I might have a little bit more favorable consideration of it, but not at $275,000. We have a sow's ear sitting over there that is owned by somebody else because we weren't bright enough to own it 40 years ago. And in the 40 years that has transpired, we see what Jimmy Bigwood's fine handiwork has done to our superintendency facilities, and Jimmy was the architect of the one across the street as well. We can expect nothing in terms of modern day standards to be applied to anything rising further in elevation than the pavement of the driveway over there. Whatever we do over there, should this be purchased, is going to cost us a considerable amount of money, a considerable amount of wasted opportunity, a considerable amount of arguing. One thing that I like to think this community has become in my lifetime, believe it or not, I was looking at the 1950 town report the other day. We had 13 graduates from our high school. They certainly were simpler times. All the admonitions of the superintendent and the principal in those days was an admonition to pay our teachers more money so that we would ensure good services for our children, and that times were uncertain, and that there would be rearmament in America, and that we needed to prepare our children for that unknown world that was ahead of them. And thus, it has always been so. And this project is pretty much proffered in a way that makes it sound like the perfect opportunity. Not entirely unlike, if you will, somebody walking up to you with a watch and wanting to know if you'd like to buy it, or perhaps pulling up in front of your house with a truckload of furniture that they're willing to sell you for $5 a piece. I'm not suggesting there's anything illegal about it. I'm simply saying that if something is too good to be true, it generally isn't true. And this has all of the earmarks of those kinds of projects that find their way bubbling up to the surface for our public consideration that cause us nothing but difficulty. This is a municipal corporation. This is a very large community. This is an important community. This is situated in the Golden Triangle of New Hampshire, on the major north-south transportation routes for both commercial trucking and rail. This community is not going to disappear. And it's time that we began to be the municipal corporation that we are in this day and age. It's time to put up public buildings that are well and thoughtfully designed by architects that represent the investment that we're going to make in our municipal corporations. Not simply something that we purchased at Goodwill because it looked like a bargain till we got it home. And I hate to put this in such plain terms, but that's how this old gentleman from Merrimack sees it, with a considerable amount of experience upon which to offer this particular position on this subject. I appreciate that I won't take up any more time of the Budget Committee, but as you can clearly see, I will not be devoted to this project in the public marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other Budget Committee members? Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, I'm sorry. Brandy.
I think you bring up a really good point of not wanting to Band-Aid the situation. We do need those buildings that we're currently using are certainly not up to standards, and this does present us with an opportunity to move them from the existing buildings to ideally a better situation for all. While I believe that that is the intent, there's so much unknown surrounding this property as to what we do with it when it is purchased. You raise another great point about the arguments that might arise because one group wants to do one thing with it, another group wants to do another. How do we find a middle ground on where our next steps are? Because there's so much unknown relative to this, it makes me a little bit nervous. I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that we purchase the building because at least then it is within our it's already on our property basically, so we might as well. But I'm just stuck with the uncertainty of the amount. I don't want to renovate a building that really isn't quality and sound enough to even renovate to begin with. And are we just, sort of kicking the can to another budget season where we have to readdress more updates that need to be made to the existing building or additional funding that's necessary in order to make, it more functional for a different group or whatever issues might arise. And I just get nervous because if we do this, I sort of feel like we're on the path to renovate it as opposed to knocking it down and rebuilding. That's sort of the direction that I see from our conversations that we would more than likely be headed in as the most cost effective. But I'm just not 100% sold that that's the right direction to go in. And I don't know that I would be able to have 100% certainty at this point anyway, because we don't have any numbers on renovating. We don't have any projected ideas as to what will be done with this building. It's just more of, are we purchasing it? And so it's just, I'm just sort of stuck, I think. So I just wanted to.
Thank you, Brandy. I just want to say that while buying this property might be a good idea, because there's nothing you could do with, somebody isn't going to be able to put a business in there. They might be able to tear it down and build a house, but I don't even know if they could get permission to do that, because a family living on that small of a property with 10,000 square feet, I just don't see them doing that. If this passes, I would hope that the school board and the school planning and building committee, which in fairness I will also say I am a member of, would look at plans to bulldoze the building and build all brand new. It might be a few more dollars, but you get a brand new building with all brand new equipment, not a 50-year-old building with a hybrid inside. And you may have replaced one side panel on the building and not a few others, and then you find out a year in that you're going to have to replace all of the other stuff because it's just totally shot. And we already know it needs a whole new roof, amongst other things. That's my personal feeling, that if this property is going to be purchased, first thing to do is level it. Second thing to do, build something new. And I still think it would be a reasonable cost, because what you might save in gutting that building and rehabbing it might not be as much as you think when you get all done. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, I'm sorry, Naomi. I didn't see a hand go up.
I just wanted to talk a small comment out there. Of course, the board was in full agreement, and I agree with what's been said from that perspective. But I wanted to answer one or two points. I'm relatively new on the board still, and so I'm still learning the history of the different attempts to create an SAU and student services building. But there's a problem that it seems to me is encountered repeatedly, and that is everybody thinks something needs to be done, but whenever something is proposed, it's not the right idea. And at some point, we're going to have to do something. Maybe we purchase this and we tear it down. That is a very important point, that we not simply repaper something that needs to be done. I don't know. I have to see numbers. But in the end, every single thing that's suggested ends up being told no. And we're going to end up with the same people in the same building indefinitely. So I think that there's room to advocate for the use of this land one way or the other. Tear it down, whatever. But we need to decide if we're going to do something. And for me, it becomes frustrating to watch a desire for something better become inactivity, rather than using it for a solution.
When the one time a new building was proposed, it got a majority vote. It did not get the 60% because it was a bond. It's only been on a ballot once.
Within that's good to keep in mind, but within that, there are other deliberations that take place along the way on a variety of committees with a variety of opinions and perspectives and public pieces, and all these mount. And so each person will have to decide if this is a solution that interests them. But I am concerned at the extent to which looking for the perfect solution has led us to simply never pursuing a solution successfully.
Thank you. One last time, any other Budget Committee members? Okay, Rich?
Just from Naomi's comments, just for fun, if that had actually been approved, we would actually have a building and the bond would pretty much be already paid off at this point. 10 years? I have a very eloquent speech by Mr. Moeller, but I'm a little confused as to why he seems to think that we would not use professional architects and general contractors to build something that will last a very, very long time. One has to look at those buildings. And someone took a 3-bedroom ranch house and converted it into a superintendent's office that we've been using for some 50 years. You think you got your money's worth out of that. There is no doubt it doesn't work. It was done horribly, because I don't think the original intent could have possibly been that this is going to last for 50 years. When you talk about, you know, he goes back to 13 students, go back to the 70s or whenever this building was actually used. I mean, you've got people that have been added to the administration. As you've increased people, you've increased staff, you've increased your human resources. IT didn't even exist 15, 20 years ago. We are now educating handicapped children, whereas in the old days they were sent off someplace else. Title programs and that type of thing. So those buildings are in horrible shape, and I don't really understand Mr. Mower's point that he thinks, and I'm not going to disagree with you, Stan, is probably knocked down and you really are buying the land. But those are buildings we have already spent years, and I literally mean years, looking at, designing, going over it. As I mentioned before, we even put in something for the public to use it for. So these are not just, there is no way this is going to even ever look as despicable as the green building is now, or the blue building for that point of view. So I'm a little bit confused as to why he would come out and not think that this isn't going to be done right. We've spent enough years on it. It's, you know, and we've got some more time to really fine tune it. But as Naomi said, every time something comes, you know, there is probably no euphora perfect, you know, proposal out there. But meanwhile, things aren't getting any better. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I have one closing sentence?
Very brief.
Very brief. The intent of this whole thing was that we were presented a very short time ago with the opportunity to purchase land that abutted our facility. It happens to have a building on it. The board felt that there were opportunities there to potentially use it for the SAU SPED building, but also control that land's destiny forever. This is the one time we have to do that. Everybody's brought up great points about tear down, build right, do it professional, all that stuff. There's 0.69 acres there, which has a building on it, that if we own, we can have that discussion and do the right thing as a district, as a town, as a whatever. But we have to buy it first, because if we let it go, we have no control over it, and the opportunity's gone. Simple as that.
Thank you, Andy. At this time, are there any members of the... Okay, go ahead, Chuck.
I'm simply responding to Mr. Herrick's inquiry as to why I might feel the way I do.
Okay.
I feel the way I do because the chairman of the school board sat next to Mr. Herrick and suggested that this would be a great local project where we could get local contractors in and get
Andy's
everybody's...
not the chairman of the school board.
Excuse me. I meant Mr. Schneider. Where we could get local contractors in and everybody kind of dig in like it was, I don't know, Andy Rooney and Judy Garland putting on a show. It suggested at this meeting, is what I heard, a suggestion of something less than the kind of commercial industrial building project that would normally be associated with a community of this size and a municipal corporation of this stature. You might see something like that take place in many other underserved parts of America and parts of New Hampshire. But that's where I got the idea, was in the presentation that was made here this evening before the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Chuck. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this warrant article, for or against? Seeing none, we will move on to Article 8. That is to raise and appropriate $878,450 to implement full-day kindergarten in the 3 elementary schools. It includes $808,901 in additional salaries and benefits and $69,549 for the original equipping of public kindergarten classrooms, which is a non-recurring cost. And the note in very bold print, if adopted, the cost of the salaries and associated benefits will be included in the operating budget in future years. This project has been a long time coming, and I am glad to see that it's finally here. The Budget Committee had questions about graduation rates, and we got answers to who has public kindergarten for full day, who doesn't. We were the last of 10 towns to do half-day kindergarten. And yes, there is money coming in the out years from Keno, but that doesn't come in the first full year of public kindergarten. And at this time, I would like to ask any member of the public that would like to speak for or against full-day public kindergarten to come up to the mic. Please state your name and your address, and please come up. Make sure the green light is on the microphone. If it isn't, then just push the little button down. One at a time would work easiest. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gillian Savitch, Savitch, and I live at 3 Fairway Drive. I wanted to come up here tonight to voice my support for full-day kindergarten. As a mother of 3 young children and a Merrimack resident, I see tremendous value this program would bring to our children and our community. You know, according to a recent article by the union leader, we have the 2nd oldest population in the nation. However, I could have told you that by looking around my neighborhood. Many of my neighbors are elderly, and they're already talking about downsizing. Nearly 75% of communities in the state already have full-day kindergarten programs. If we as a community do not remain current, how will this impact our ability to attract new families? You know, premium outlets and the close proximity to BAE and Fidelity are only going to get us so far. Personally, my middle daughter is preparing to enter kindergarten next year. I'm concerned that after spending the past 3 years in a full-day program of pre-K and preschool, a half-day program with a transition to the K extension program will be too much of a break in the day. Before she's even settled into her kindergarten class, she'll have to be dismissed and bused to an after-school program, and shuffling between multiple programs will not promote learning. She needs time to get to know her teachers and her classmates, to engage in art and music and science, which aren't currently part of the half-day program. She needs time to engage in the full spectrum of learning. I understand that for many, all that they hear when they hear about full-day kindergarten is my taxes are going to go up, or I don't have kids in kindergarten and young kids anymore, so this is really not my problem. But if we're going to continue to invest in our community with full-day kindergarten, that will benefit us in the long run. As our population it continues to gray, Merrimack needs to position itself, I feel, in an attractive option to young families. And I think adding this program now will help us do that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Maggie Logsdon, Logsdon. I am a mother of 2 sons, Logsdon. Thank you. I'm very nervous. I'm sorry. I don't know how to follow that. I just want to say that I'm in favor of full-day kindergarten. I have 2 young sons, both attending Reed's Ferry School. One is a 3rd grader, and the other is in the pre-K MEEP program. And I just think that my youngest son would benefit greatly by attending full-day kindergarten next year instead of cramming 2.5 hours of curriculum into one, or a full day worth of curriculum into 2.5 hours. He'll need the skills to be able to socialize, excel academically. There won't be any time for the arts and the sciences. They'll focus mostly on the general basics. And I just want to say I'm in favor of full-day kindergarten. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next.
She said she was from.
My name is Beth Grady, and I live at 15 Parker Drive. I spoke last week at the...
If I could ask you to speak up, please. Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry. I spoke last week at the school committee meeting, so I wanted to come speak today again in favor of full-day kindergarten. I have a second grader at Mastrocola, and then I have a 4-year-old who will be entering kindergarten next year at Mastrocola, and I'm hoping that it'll be full-day kindergarten. I do have the experience of watching my son go through half-day kindergarten. Phenomenal teacher, wonderful year, just a lot of transitions, as they were saying, was difficult for him. But I'm more coming to speak. I'm a teacher. I'm a first grade teacher in a different district. I taught part-time kindergarten when I first started teaching about 15 years ago, so I have experience and I understand what it's like to try to teach a half-day program. It's very difficult. I know that the kindergarten teachers in their presentations mentioned it's a full curriculum. There's not a half-day curriculum and a full-day curriculum. Everyone gets the same curriculum, same expectations, same benchmarks to meet by the end of the year, with half the amount of time to do it in. As a teacher, when I was teaching half-day kindergarten, and even when I teach now, you can skim the surface of the curriculum to try to get through it, but that's not best practice. What is best practice is taking into consideration your room full of learners and their varying needs, and be able to differentiate based on those needs. And small group learning is crucial in that. In my classroom right now, I teach first grade. I do a lot of differentiation, a lot of guided work. I do guided reading where different students with different reading levels, I can meet their needs and help them grow where they need to, and strengthen their learning where it needs to be the most. I also do guided math, which I know I came to a school board meeting a couple months ago, and they did a presentation on guided math, so I know Merrimack does guided math as well, which is the same idea. It's the same curriculum, but you can foster and tailor your learning to the specific needs of the students. You can take small groups, rotate them, and if there's students who are really excelling in math, you can challenge them, you can give them that time. If there's students who need a little extra support, maybe some one-on-one learning, more hands-on learning, you can provide that. And half-day kindergarten program, there's just not the time. You're just really it's you against the clock. You're trying to get everything in those. It's not even a half day because you have to take out lunch. It's less than a half day. And so unfortunately, you're just kind of skimming the surface. So I find that the academics, you're just getting through it rather than putting quality education and thinking of the individual learners and being able to meet their needs. Also, in addition to the academics, I think about social emotional curriculum. There's really no time for that in a half-day program, and that is so important in early childhood learning. Students need time to foster an imagination and to share an imagination. Sharing an imagination is really important, to have time to work together and play together, and center-based learning and pretend play, and there's just not time in a half-day program at all to do that. I also talked last time about fostering independence. We want our students to be independent. We want them to be able to zip up their coats on their own, to tie their shoes, to be able to open a glue stick or open their lunch, open a snack bag. When you have a two-day program and a half-day program, and you have 5-year-olds coming up to you, you don't have time to guide them through it. You just do it for them, and we're not really fostering that independence. So as a first grade teacher, the district that I work in does have a full-day kindergarten. They changed over a few years ago, and the first graders are coming in. They're ready to learn. They're adjusted to the routines, the expectations, and they have a lot more stamina earlier on in the year, so we can really hit the ground running in first grade. And just all in all, to kind of end things, I just look at the surrounding towns, and we want our students to have, it's an education to be equitable, and right now it's not. We're one of the only surrounding towns that doesn't have this offered, and it just puts them at a disadvantage. By the end of kindergarten, they've received half the amount of education of that of their peers in surrounding towns, which is just unfortunate for these little kiddos who are so eager to learn at this age. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Heather.
First, thank you, and thank you to all of the parents who are here tonight. It is very brave of you to come, and so don't be nervous. We're fun-loving people here, most of us. So, I'm really interested in the fact that you're an educator, you're a mom. A lot of the pushback that we might hear with a full-day program is around the fact that, gosh, that's, it's exhausting for our little kiddos. It's, the classrooms that I have been in with excellent kindergarten or preschool, actually, teachers they're doing that math curriculum, they're doing that reading curriculum, all based in play. It's all around them learning in a play-based environment, so that they are having fun while they're learning. They're running around the room. They're using manipulatives. They're doing that kind of thing. Can you give us just a simple example of how you do that in your classroom, so that our listeners can understand it's not them sitting in rows of desks with you teaching at the top of the class?
So I do something called, like I mentioned, it's guided math. I teach first grade, so I'm not a kindergarten teacher, but I know it does work the same way. I know that at my school, the kindergartners do guided math as well. So I'll do a short mini lesson, so the kids will come over to the rug. We're lucky enough we have active boards. I can do a quick, brief, maybe 10-minute lesson, whole group. And then I do rotations. So and I will do my rotations based on their needs. So, the kids, in my mind, I have my challenge group, and I have my kiddos who need a little extra time, a little extra support. And then I have kind of the kids who are right where I want them to be or right where I need them to be. So one group might be playing a math game, and one group will be with me at kind of the teacher table, and another group might be doing independent work in their workbooks, or they might be we have iPads, and they can do some fact fluency work in math on their iPads. So every 10, 15 minutes, they'll rotate. So within an hour block of math it would only be 10, 15 minutes of me, direct teacher, in front of the group, where the rest of the class, if you were to walk into my classroom, there'd be a group at the rug, and they'd be playing math games that support whatever the skill that we're working on is. There'll be a game or a group on the iPads or in their workbooks doing work that they're working on, and then there'll be a group with me with more guided practice. So, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Anybody else like to come up and speak or speak again? Mr. Chevenel.
Although I'm not a member of the public, I guess I am a member of the public, but I'm staff. Anyway, the kindergarten aid, I just want to clarify that. If you put full-time kindergarten in, you'll get next year $1,100 per student, which we have estimated as $264,000 worth of revenue that you don't have now. In 1920, when the Keno money comes in, we could get a lot more. It depends upon how well Keno is doing. But we are guaranteed from the state the $1,100 based upon our average daily membership that we submit to the DOE come the first day of school in school year 18-19. So that's a guarantee. And on your budget and revenue summary on your last page of your handout, you see that as an estimated revenue. Full-day kindergarten, $264,000 worth of revenue. So there's an offset to that. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Chevenel. Is there anybody else? I just wanted to point out, we were given a list this evening based on a request from a member who could not be with us tonight, of towns offering kindergarten and in what form do they offer it. I just want to let everybody know there are 17 towns that do half-day kindergarten or unspecified. There are 10 towns that are considering full-day kindergarten, Merrimack being one of them. There are 6 towns that do a tuition-based kindergarten, and that's where they're not going to get the state aid that Merrimack would get, because they're doing tuition-based. There are over 150 towns in the state of New Hampshire offering full-day public kindergarten. Any other comments on this warrant article? Chuck Mower.
First, I'd like to say it's really nice to see members of the public come to a Budget Committee meeting, and I'm very grateful for their input. I, too, am a staunch supporter of public kindergarten, so much so that I believe had I been on the school board, I might have advocated for it to be adopted and put into the budget as an operating feature of the budget and not subject to the whims of the voting public. I can't think of any educational tool that we know of and have known of for over 50 years that is more fundamental to a good beginning in a K through 12 educational program for students of all learning abilities and learning attributes. There's just too much good to be said about it. We certainly ought to be pulling ourselves into the 21st century by offering such a program to the fundamental good of the people that reside in the town of Merrimack. To that point, I'd like to remind everybody that the people that will be voting on a warrant article are the registered voters of the town of Merrimack. They certainly don't represent everybody in the town of Merrimack. They represent only the registered voters. And even at that, they are still a minority because the way our taxes are assessed with equity across the board, we have an industrial base, a commercial base, and a residential base. And it's only the residential base that votes, but large corporations, and we have a number of them, there shall be unnamed at this point, but we're all familiar with the broad tax base that we have in the town of Merrimack. People that are the movers and shakers and leaders in industries such as these understand the benefit of this kind of program to their workforce, to the community in which they make an investment in their businesses, and quite frankly, they add it to the cost of their doing business. They don't really think of it as paying taxes. They think of it as a fixed cost in a community well-run that they need and want to be a part of. And the same is true of the commercial sector. And so I remind people that very often the people that say, I don't want my taxes to go up, rely on a very thin argument about what the public good is and how broadly the responsibility for the conduct of the community rests across the rest of the community. Thank you very much. I'm certainly fully in support of this article.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other comments from the members of the Budget Committee? Seeing none, we will move on to Article 9. This is the operating budget. and it is to raise and appropriate $74,817,416 for the upcoming school year. If this amount is defeated, the default budget, which I will explain in a little bit, would take effect, and that would be $75,153,005, unless the school board decided to reconsider the amount and go for another meeting. This $74 million represents a 0.74 increase from the current budget we are in now. It includes health care, which had a 2.9% increase only. It includes New Hampshire retirement, which for those of you that might read the papers or check certain social media outlets will find is up again, and we pay more and more each year towards the retirement, which we don't, as a town or a school district, have any say in. It's dictated by state law. This amount also includes an additional $6,000 that this committee added last week during our work session, and that is for training for the 2 special school resource officers in the high school and the middle school. And it was added with the intent of getting them specific school training that will be very helpful to them when the need arises that we have certain problems. And everybody in the budget committee was either in favor of it, though one of the school board liaison did abstain from voting on that because she was representing the school board. And the school board has not taken that up yet to see if they're going to agree with our number. Everything else is pretty darn lean. There is money in the budget for roof construction, and we have over 10 acres of roof. There is a plan in place to replace all the roofs with 35 and 40-year non-prorated warranties, so that none of us are going to have to be worrying about roof replacement after we replace one. It's a budget to me that's a no-brainer. But do you have any comments? Does anybody like to speak about the operating budget? Any budget committee members that would like to speak about the operating budget? Seeing none, that is the last warrant article. I declare this public hearing closed, and I will now reconvene the school district budget committee meeting, where we are going to be voting on the moneyed warrant articles. The first moneyed warrant article, oh, and before I do that, Mrs. Heinrich, you ready to do the roll call votes? Okay. If you would also make sure to have a microphone when you're announcing the names. Article 3 is the contract between the Merrimack Educational Support Staff. It's to raise and appropriate $245,594. Would someone like to move that warrant article for recommendation? Jordan made a motion, seconded by John. Are there any comments that anybody in the Budget Committee has on this warrant article? Seeing none, we will do a roll call vote. Mrs. Heinrich, would you do that, please?
Chuck.
Aye.
Naomi.
Aye.
Heather.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
Kevin.
Abstain.
David.
Aye.
Jordan.
Aye.
Stan.
Yes.
And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 0, 1.
801. That warrant article will go on the ballot as recommended by the Budget Committee. Next up, warrant Article 5. This is for $150,000 for the Emergency Capital Reserve Fund, and it's coming out of surplus, or up to $150,000, or 10% of the unencumbered surplus, coming out of this year's budget. Do I have a motion to recommend that? Recommended, motion by David, second by John. Any conversations on this? Seeing none, Mrs. Heinrich, would you call the vote, please?
Kevin.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Stan.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Chuck.
Aye.
Naomi.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
John.
Aye.
And Brandy. 900.
And that will go on as recommended. Next up, warrant Article 6 for $214,826, and this is to do the bus loop in the lower parking lot at Thornton's Ferry School. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Moore, seconded by John. Any conversations on this warrant article? Mrs. Heinrich?
Naomi.
Yes.
Brandy.
Yes.
Chuck.
Aye.
David.
Yes.
Stan.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Also 900.
And that'll go on as recommended. Next, warrant Article 7. This is for $275,000. This is for the purchase of the land and building known as Brentwood Drive, which is, we call it the Red Building. Do I have a motion?
Over there.
Motion by Heather. Do I have a second? Second by John. Any conversations on this warrant article? Yes, Heather.
Just briefly, so in hearing the concerns and comments alike, I think that's really important for us to hear. My vote will be yes on this because the fear that I have of who may purchase this building without us taking it into our ownership, is more dramatic to me than what will happen after it's purchased. I believe that Merrimack is known for its citizen engagement and being able to bring people in to have conversations about the facilities or early childhood or whatever the case may be, and I have full faith that, and I will want to be involved in what that looks like with the building. But my fear of what will happen to that space so close to our students and educators that we will not have control over is more far-reaching than any concerns I have about what that building is going to end up being after we purchase. So that's my vote for yes.
Anyone else? I'd just like to state that a number of years ago on McElwain Street, very close to this building, there was a water tower, a water tank. The school district didn't purchase it. Now there's a house sitting on it. And we could have used that land too. While my personal feeling is this building needs to be demolished, not rebuilt, I also feel we need to purchase the land to keep it with us and not have something strange go in there. While it might be residential zoning, you never know what somebody's going to put up or the problems that might occur. So from a safety point of view, I will be supporting this, but I also be very clear, I'm for bulldozing that thing down. I don't think it's worth fixing. Thank you. Mrs. Heinrich, would you do the vote, please?
John?
Yes.
Naomi?
Yes.
Kevin?
No.
Jordan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Chuck?
Nay.
Brandy? Stan?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 0.
That'll go on as recommended. Next is warrant article number 8. This is for $878,450. This is to implement full-day kindergarten and equip the new extra classrooms with the proper equipment. Do I have a motion? Heather, and I'm going to second this one.
Oh, he was perfect. He had every second so far.
I haven't done every second. No, you know what? I'll relinquish to John. Okay? You're right, he has to have every second. So let's not break the mold. Any comments about full-time kindergarten from the Budget Committee?
Just one small comment.
Yes, Heather.
Thank you so much to the Merrimack School District and our community for putting this before the citizens of our great town. I know a lot of hard work, a lot of deliberative dialogue happened on this issue. This is an option for families that can come in and take advantage of this. It puts equity into our community for children to be able to participate in this. If parents still want to participate in a half-day program, they can still participate in a half-day program. And so there's all of these options that are available because of this. And I just really, really thank you for being deliberate about it, for bringing it to the voters so that we can really see where Merrimack stands on this. And I appreciate all of that hard work.
I would also like to thank you, ladies, for coming in tonight, and some have left and coming to speak. I know that was a very difficult thing. You brought a good coach with you, and I hope you will do the same at deliberative session and get out there and fight for it on Election Day. Anything else? Yes, Jordan.
I just want to reiterate what was already said, which I think is important, and I'd encourage you to, I forget, Gillian? Gillian. I'd encourage you to say this again at the deliberative session, but this isn't something that just benefits the small number of families that have kids that are going to be kindergartners next year. This is something for the community. It's something that benefits everyone in the community. It also benefits our town. Taking some of what Chuck had said earlier about, businesses, they see the value in it. It's something that we need to do to stay competitive and to make sure that we're a destination for growth. So I'd encourage you, Gillian, especially the points you made about, the town getting older, the state getting older. We want to attract people to our community. This is something they expect. So I suspect you'll be there at the...
David.
I just want to say, so I have a child that's going to be entering kindergarten next year, so my vote on this cannot be completely unbiased, but I would vote for this every year that it's presented in front of me. So next year he'll be in kindergarten, the year after he will not be, and I will still have the same vote, same feelings. I ask any parent whose kids have gone through the school system and don't see any benefit anymore for the full-day kindergarten to consider, would it have been a little bit better for your child if they had had full-day kindergarten when they went through? I think thinking that you don't need it and why should we vote for other kids to have it is the wrong approach for this. Thanks.
Anybody else? Seeing none, we will vote. Mrs. Heinrich?
David?
Abstain.
Okay. Chuck?
Aye.
Stan?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jordan?
In favor.
Naomi?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
900.
801.
No, 801.
Excuse me, 801. Thank you.
That will go on the ballot as recommended by the Budget Committee. Next up is warrant Article 9. And this is to raise and appropriate $74,817,416. And I move that amount as the operating budget for the 17-18 budget. 18-19 budget. I apologize. Thank you, John. One of the things I didn't really get into during the public hearing was on the default budget. And I'm going to take a personal thing and do it now. The default budget is not something that we vote on. It is not something this committee does. That is done by Assistant Superintendent Chevenel following the RSA protocols for the default budget. And it includes recurring expenses and bills that need to be paid, including debt. And it's not something you can adjust or change. And just so everybody is clear on that. And as you did notice, it is more money than the operating budget. Any other comments on the operating budget? Seeing none. Mrs. Heinrich?
Stan?
Yes, emphatically.
Chuck?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's 3. Okay.
Okay, got it. 1, 2, 3. That's 4 votes so far, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Kevin?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes?
John?
Yes.
Jordan?
Yes.
Naomi?
Abstain, please.
Yes, got it. Eight, 0-1.
And that will go on as recommended to the voters for deliberative session. Next up on our list, we've finished the minutes, so we don't have to do that. Under announcements, filing period starts Wednesday, February 21st, and goes through Friday, March 2nd at 5 p.m. If you are interested in running for a school district office, you need to go down to the school district's superintendent's office and file. You must be a Merrimack resident and a registered voter. There are 2 positions for school board this year. There are 2 positions for planning and building committee. There are 4 3-year positions for the budget committee, and there is 1 one-year position for the budget committee. And just to remind those whose terms are coming up for renewal, Heather, Jordan, John, and David. And then we have the vacant position from one of the folks who got elected but moved out of town before they could attend a meeting. So if you are planning on running for re-election or election, please get down to the school district office and register to sign up for it. If you are not going to run for re-election, please let me know so we can try and find somebody to fill that slot.
Stan?
Yes, Chuck?
Just as a point of clarification, is there a prohibition against holding both a municipal office and a school district office at the same time?
No, there is not. The prohibition would be if you were a full-time employee of the school district, you cannot hold an elected position in the school district. If you are a part-time employee of the school district, you can. If you are a full-time employee of the town, you can't run for a town office. But if you're part-time, you could. That answer your question, Chuck? Okay. I would like to thank you all. We have got through this budget season with no snow dates. A lot of good investigation, questions, comments, and done it respectfully. And that makes the job a lot easier. It also makes it easier when the administration does their job, which they have done, and presented us with a budget that is very lean. We have conversation, we give directions, guidance and direction, and hope for the best after that. And I would like to personally thank all of you for volunteering your time to do this. Our next meeting is Thursday, March 8th, after deliberative session is over with. We have reserved seating up front, and after the deliberative session ends, we will meet to approve the minutes for this meeting and for the public hearing, and if any of the warrant articles have been changed, we have the opportunity to vote on it again to see if we still want to recommend it. And And that goes for you too, Naomi.
I look forward to it.
The meeting starts at 7 o'clock. And if they get snowed out, it's on Friday, March 9th. But, no, it's at the upper elementary school in the APR, which is where we meet. At this time, there is more public participation. If anybody would like to come up and speak about something that has to do with what's transpired tonight, or whatever, please do so now or forever hold your peace. And I guess everybody must be happy, so I will close public participation. Is there any other things we need to consider? Seeing none. Mr. Mueller. Seconded by John. And yes, you got all the seconds tonight, John. That is not a debatable motion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? Thank you all very much. We'll see you March 8th. Good night.